Indigenous populations around the world have sacred relationships with water. This connection to water is often written into, our rituals. It's written into cosmogonies and creation stories. But the power of water is also realizing the fragility of humanity, because we cannot exist without it. And I think Indigenous cultures recognize that. Many Indigenous cultures do. And again, it's about that humility, because without water, we do not exist.
All the freshwater lens starts from the mountainous regions. I've seen firsthand the impacts of flood, the impacts of not just sea level rise from coast, but rather from the mountainous regions. Why? Because there's very limited upstream management, watershed management. It's foolish to say we are arid prone or we have issues with desertification. No, we do not. You see the 15, 20 year time series data, you'll see nothing less than a minimum 2,000 millimeter of precipitation. What we do is, on the other hand, all this water, we make these fancy drainage systems and we drain it all out to the sea. Instead of using it from upstream management, if we control it upstream management using different techniques, one, we could do contour farming, using different nature-based solution methods, primitive methods, which has always been there, contour, control mechanism flows, instead of making these fancy drainage systems, or instead of making dams, which we are very fond of. Pacific is very fond of grey infrastructure. The moment we talk about controlling water, yes, we need to make a dam. No, there are other nature-based solutions or conservation techniques that can be used. One, also, the same system can be used to control all our river systems. Now, hundreds, if thousands of river streams start from mountainous regions, and they all connect, coming to discharging as a main river source. For example, we have Nandi, we have Singatoka, main rivers, we have NUWAO River. These are the river systems that we have that connect right from the mountainous regions to the sea. If we control all forms of pollution from upstream, massive issues we are seeing, this logging, plastics, cattle, all of this affects the 75%, if not 90% of the coastal dwellers that we have around Fiji. All of the issues start from the ridge. So if we control, we try to support farmers using different variation techniques and methods. We control the freshwater system in the lens. We control the upstream management that in turn supports the freshwater lens that trickles down into our wetland systems that also act as a filtration system. We control most, if not all, of the pollution, whether it be plastics and land-based pollution. And there's also a huge amount of diseases that is waterborne. For example, leptospirosis. More than 100 coastal communities in Fiji, they are situated near to a river. And most of this river is the source. The river and the oceans are intrinsically intertwined into a livelihood of the Pacific ecosystem. So catching, bathing, all of this happens in the river. And that's where we have leptospirosis and all these other unwanted diseases that could be easily controlled upstream.
In the atolls, we only have two main sources of water, which is the groundwater and the rain. And now there are modern technologies where they introduced osmosis systems where they convert seawater into fresh water. So those are the sources of water that we have. Whatever activity that's going around in that particular area will all end up in the water reserve in the ground. The water in those areas seem to be smelly because of those rubbish lying around in those areas, and they rot and find their way into the waterlands. And there are also areas where people can drink those waters because those water from the ground because of its freshness and the quality. When we look at the live and learn approach on dealing with groundwater, what they are trying to do is trying to inform people of the consequences that they will have if they continue to dump waste around their wells improper dumping of rubbish is one of the issues that people are being informed not to do. There are quite a number of projects that distributing water tanks to people because they think water tanks are much more safer to drink than groundwater. The Live and Learn try to encourage and inform people of the problems. Even though the Live and Learn doesn't have much resources where it can supply people with some new technologies where they can just convert well water into fresh water. But there are companies, they are selling those filters where you can just filter well water to become fresh water. But if we look at the nature-based solutions to these problems, I think we really need to put a lot of efforts in training these people to actually incorporate all these kind of thinkings in their minds.
The people think having a much more Western approach to things is the solution or the answer to the changing climate or the answer to everything. No. Traditional methods are now being lost. So the knowledge isn't passed on to the other younger generation. And younger generation are more not so much concerned about the traditional methods. And this is a massive problem. It's a changing mindset.
My connection to the waters in my village in Si'umo, I think for me is probably the most significant. We have Loloa, which is a freshwater spring right near our home in Si'umo, and that in essence comes from the mountain. There's reservoirs of water. It takes thousands of years for that water to then spring up in Loloa. But there are many stories and dances and poetry about Loloa. Pacific Indigenous peoples draw upon their own Indigenous knowledge systems at a very local level, from village to village, from island nation to island nation. And the way that the oral stories talk about it, the way that Raui or Sa, the sacred practices of restraint are exercised in relation to the water. So it's always future focused. It isn't just about the here and now or a 5-year strategy. It's about a 10,000-year strategy, and what does that mean for generations to come? So that waterway acknowledged, and valued in its own living form is very much about knowing the future generations that will then carry those relationships through.